Strange, but true, in the Middle Ages, the deadliest threats weren't always swords or plagues, they were the everyday things sitting right in your home. Tomatoes were poison, forks were devil's tools, and mirrors could steal your soul. Superstition and bad science turned ordinary objects into silent killers. In this video, we'll uncover the bizarre list of normal medieval dangers that will make you rethink your kitchen drawer. Number 8. Potatoes of doom. Imagine being handed a potato in medieval Europe. Sounds harmless, right? Wrong. To your average peasant in the 1500s, this knobby lump of starch might as well have been cursed treasure. When potatoes first arrived from the New World, people didn't know what to do with them. They were suspicious, ugly, and worst of all part of the nightshade family. You know, the plant family famous for containing belladonna, a deadly nightshade, hey. I don't eat this unless you want to meet God early. So when villagers saw potatoes, sprouting little green patches or weird flowers, they assumed it was poison, and sometimes they were right. Uncooked or improperly stored potatoes can produce solanine, a toxic chemical that can cause nausea, paralysis, and in high doses, death. Congratulations, you just turned dinner into a medieval murder weapon. And because nobody had Google back then, word spread fast that these things were tools of the devil. Some priests even banned them, claiming they weren't mentioned in the Bible, therefore they had to be evil. Ironically, potatoes would later save Europe from famine, but in the early days, biting into one was like rolling the dice with your digestive system. If you lived back then and casually munched on a green potato, well, let's just say your legacy would be the guy who lost a duel to a vegetable. Number 7. The deadly bath. Picture this, you're a medieval noble, and someone suggests you take a bath. Scandalous, because in much of medieval Europe, people thought bathing was dangerous. The belief was that warm water opened your pores, which basically left you defenseless against every disease lurking in the air. Doctors, if we're being generous with that word, actually advised against frequent bathing because they thought it made you weaker. So instead of soap and water, the wealthy layered themselves in perfumes, powders, and fancy clothes to mask the smell. The poor, they just stayed smelly. But here's the twist. Refusing to bathe didn't actually protect you, quite the opposite. Without hygiene, lice, fleas, and bacteria thrived. And those little freeloaders carried delightful gifts like typhus and the plague. So while you thought you were saving yourself from a bad breeze by skipping the bath, you were actually becoming a walking Airbnb for deadly germs. If you were lucky enough to take a bath in communal bathhouses, congratulations, you've basically bought a ticket to a disease convention. Skin infections, parasites, STDs, you name it. And let's not forget, the water itself was often reused. Imagine soaking in what's essentially medieval soup made of other people's filth. So yes, in the Middle Ages, a nice warm bath could be the death of you. Forget drowning, just being clean was risky business. Number 6. Bloodletting Bonanza. Now, let's say you did get sick in the Middle Ages. What did your friendly neighborhood doctor prescribe? Leeches. Or, if they were feeling especially ambitious, an iron blade. Because apparently, the solution to everything from headaches to fevers to the plague was to let out the bad blood. The logic came from the ancient belief in the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Too much of one, slice, bleed, repeat. Got a cold? Time for bloodletting. Got anxiety? Yep, bloodletting. Got a paper cut? Well, good news, you're already halfway cured. The problem was that bloodletting didn't cure you, it just made you weaker. Lose enough blood and surprise, you might not wake up at all. There are recorded cases of kings and nobles dying faster because their doctors enthusiastically drained them like medieval Capri Suns. And the worst part, people paid good money for this treatment. So while your 21st century self might pop an Advil, your medieval ancestor would just pop a vein, literally. In a world without antibiotics or modern medicine, this wasn't just a bad idea, it was an express ticket to the afterlife, courtesy of Dr. Leeches and Co. Number 5. Fashion that kills. You know how we joke that fashion is pain. In the Middle Ages, it was also poison, suffocation, and occasional spinal damage. For starters, makeup often contained lead, mercury, and arsenic. Because nothing says I'm rich like slowly disfiguring your skin and frying your nervous system. Powdered wigs and pale cosmetics were considered hot, but behind the glam was a toxic time bomb. Then there was clothing. Corsets in later centuries are famous, but even before that, people wore ridiculously tight garments and massive headdresses that were basically medieval safety hazards. Ladies could literally knock over candles and set themselves on fire just by walking through a door. Men weren't innocent either. They wore long pointy shoes called polanes, which were so impractical they sometimes caused infections in the feet. Imagine tripping in shoes that double as stilts and then dying from a blister. Peak fashion. So yeah, in medieval times, looking good really could kill you. Forget runway ready, it was more like funeral ready. Number 4. Water, the silent killer. Here's the irony. The one thing you think you can't live without water was often the quickest way to the grave. Medieval water sources were basically open sewers. Wells, rivers, even public fountains were filled with bacteria, parasites, and waste from both humans and animals. People didn't know about microbes yet, but they definitely noticed that water sometimes made you violently ill. So what did they do? They drank beer. Weak, watered-down ale was safer than water, because the brewing process killed off most of the bad stuff. This is why even kids were sipping beer at breakfast. It wasn't a frat party, it was survival. But on the unlucky days when you couldn't get ale and you drank straight water, you might end up with dysentery, cholera, or worse. So next time you complain about tap water tasting weird, remember, your ancestors would have killed for it. For them, a glass of medieval water was basically Russian roulette with extra diarrhea. Number 3. Chimney of death. Picture a cold winter's night. You're huddled around the fire in your cozy stone cottage. Feels safe, right, except your chimney is plotting against you. Early chimneys were poorly designed, often narrow and clogged with soot. That meant smoke didn't always leave the house, it just hung around, slowly filling your lungs with carbon monoxide. People would sometimes wake up dizzy, confused, or not at all. Entire families could suffocate overnight, not from fire, but from invisible gas they didn't even know existed. And when chimneys did vent, they could still spark roof fires, collapsing entire houses in minutes. Basically, medieval heating systems had two settings: freeze to death or die of smoke inhalation. So while modern folks complain about their smoke detectors beeping at 2 a.m., medieval families would have gladly taken the noise over silently dying in their sleep. Your chimney wasn't just part of the house, it was a serial killer with perfect cover. Number 2. Medieval medicine cabinets of doom. So, your tooth hurts, your stomach aches, or maybe you've just been stabbed by a rusty pitchfork. What's the cure? If you lived in the Middle Ages, odds are it involved ground up animal parts, questionable herbs, or my personal favorite literal poison. Mercury, arsenic, and lead all made guest appearances in medieval remedies. Nothing says get well soon like swallowing the same ingredients found in rat poison. Then there were the animal-based treatments. Got a headache? Here, rub a dead mole on it. Feeling weak? Drink a potion made from pulverized emeralds. Bonus, you'll also be broke. And for seizures, blood of a gladiator if you could afford it. Not only did these cures not work, but they often made you sicker. At best, you got a placebo. At worst, you got a very short, very exciting obituary. And the wildest part, people trusted these cures because they came from authorities like apothecaries and physicians. But with zero knowledge of germs or chemistry, medicine was basically improv theatre with higher stakes. In other words, if the disease didn't kill you, the cure probably would. Number 1. The plague, aka a nature's reset button. We can't talk about deadly everyday life in the Middle Ages without mentioning the Black Death, the grand finale of medieval hazards. Forget exotic myths or unlucky accidents, this was the big leagues. Between 1347 and 1351, the plague wiped out up to half of Europe's population. Half. Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing half your neighborhood is gone. The kicker, the plague wasn't some rare event, it was fueled by the most ordinary things. Fleas on rats, rats on ships, ships in ports. Suddenly, your cozy home became a death trap because a flea decided to hitchhike on a rodent. And people didn't know what caused it. Some blamed bad air, some blamed astrology, some blamed Jews, leading to horrific violence. Actual prevention, non-existent. Daily life became a lottery of doom. You could be a healthy merchant one day and a corpse in a plague pit the next. Doctors wore those creepy bird masks stuffed with herbs, thinking it filtered the miasma. Spoiler, it didn't. The only thing those masks filtered was their career prospects. So while we joke about medieval people dying from soup, fashion, or wallpaper, the plague was the ultimate reminder. In the Middle Ages, existence itself was hazardous. Basically, living back then was like playing survival mode on hardcore difficulty with no response. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.